The Quiet Corner opening. The winter night in Chicago was so cold that even the thick glass of the cafe trembled slightly. Outside, the snow fell heavily, as if trying to swallow the entire city. The streetlights cast a pale yellow glow onto the white, blinding snow, turning everything into a silent, eerie painting. But inside the small cafe called the Quiet Corner, in the old street corner with a gently creaking wooden door whenever the wind blows, the fireplace was blazing with glowing red flames. The aroma of coffee blended with the scent of cinnamon and burning wood, enveloping the space in an invisible blanket. Soft, gentle, and safe. But yet, amid that warmth, Mrs. Eleanor still felt cold. She sat at a table near the fireplace, her favorite spot for many years, a small corner, enough to look out through the foggy window where lovers once entered, took off their coats and smiled at each other, as if winter was just a stranger. In front of her, a steaming cup of Earl Grey and a thick novel she had brought along for 3 weeks, but still hadn't read a single chapter. Because she wasn't here to read. She came to remember. An old picture frame lay quietly beside her tea, a small, worn wooden frame containing a faded sepia wedding photo. In it, a man with gentle eyes had his hand on her shoulder, when they were young, in love, and still needed each other. Robert, her husband, the only man who ever looked at her as if the world was never big enough to keep them apart. He had been gone for 7 years, but that loss wasn't like losing a precious item. It was a hollowing emptiness. It felt like each day she was merely surviving, not truly living. Her children were far away, one in California, the other often too busy to call her on Thanksgiving. She knew they loved her, but that love now resembled postcards sent according to a schedule, full but no longer warm. Sometimes she wondered, am I becoming a burden? Unforgotten object left behind in the world of the young? Old age to her wasn't just aching backs and fading memories. It was a sense of being adrift, walking into a crowded room where no one looks your way, sharing an old story only to realize there's no one left to remember it with you. The fireplace still burned, the bartender still smiled, couples still whispered, and Mrs. Eleanor sat there, in a crowded space, yet feeling like she was the only one left outside that door.
The wind struck the glass once more. A shiver ran down Mrs. Eleanor's spine, even though she was sitting right beside the glowing fireplace. Her hand, thin with joints protruding beneath mottled skin, traced the edge of the photo frame. Her fingertips trembled, like her memories each time they tried to cling to the past. Just a small tremor, just a slight misaligned touch. The frame tilted, slid off the table, fell. Crash! The harsh sound tore through the quiet of the cafe like a blade slicing through memory. The wedding photo, the only one, intact for more than 40 years, lay scattered on the tiled floor. The glass had shattered into tiny shards, reflecting the firelight like glittering wounds. Fragments were scattered at her feet, like bits of memory crushed beyond repair. Eleanor bent down very slowly. She was no longer as agile as she used to be. Her knees ached, her back stiffened, but the physical pain was nothing compared to what was screaming inside her heart. Oh, Robert. His name slipped from her lips like a cry for help that no one heard. And then she wept. Not the quiet tears like every other time, but big, heavy drops falling hard, pooling on the cold tiles. They streamed through the broken glass, reflecting the image of an old woman, hunched, helpless in the face of her own pain. She wasn't crying just for the photo. She was crying for herself, crying for a time long gone, for hands no longer steady enough to hold on to the past, for a weary body slowly becoming a burden she no longer dared to ask love for. And above all, she cried for Robert's death. She had never told anyone, not her children, not the neighbors. But the truth was, Robert died during the COVID-19 pandemic. On a bleak spring morning, when he quietly left home to buy groceries for the family. She had begged him to stay home that day. "You're older now. Let me go." But Robert, as always, only smiled. "Your heart is weak. Standing in line is riskier for you than me." And then he never came back. That memory gnawed at her every night. If only she had been more insistent. If only she had thrown a tantrum to change his mind. If only she had been a little more stubborn. Maybe, just maybe, he would still be here. Guilt has no sound, but it echoes endlessly inside. It makes every glance from her grandchildren feel like a forgiveness she doesn't deserve. It makes her voice falter every time she speaks of him, as though she's hiding part of the story. And now, as the last photo shattered, she felt as if she had let go of that man for the second time.
A moment passed, long as eternity, since the photo frame had shattered. Eleanor remained hunched over, her trembling hands fumbling with shards of glass, as if she could piece back what had been lost, though she knew she couldn't. Then a figure appeared beside her. A warm young hand, careful and gentle, reached out and supported her hand, lost amid the broken fragments. "Let me help." A low, soft voice, carrying an unfamiliar tenderness. It belonged to a young man, perhaps in his early 20s, dark-skinned, tall and slender. This was David, an Indian student who often came here to study on Saturday afternoons. But Eleanor had never really noticed him. Today he had been sitting across the cafe, quietly observing everything from a distance. David said nothing more. He simply knelt and wrapped each shard of glass in a napkin, one by one. He carefully picked up the photograph, now scratched at one corner, gently brushed the dust off, and handed it back to Eleanor with both hands, as if returning something sacred. Then he sat down, not across from her, but slightly beside her. Slowly, with eyes full of quiet sincerity, he said, "He must have been a wonderful man." Eleanor choked up. She looked at the photo in her hand, then at the young man's face. The words, so simple, so untheatrical, softened her heart, like a sheet of ice cracking in the sun. She nodded just barely. Words wouldn't come. But the tears did. From behind the bar, a woman had been watching everything. Maria, a middle-aged Latina nurse with a sturdy build and her hair tied neatly back, had seen it all. She often stopped by the cafe after her shifts, bringing with her the eyes of someone who had witnessed far too many goodbyes at the hospital. Maria's gaze now was soft and heavy, not curious, but experienced, marked by someone who had known loss. She didn't walk over right away. She simply stood in silence, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the woman across the room to stop pretending she was still strong. As for Eleanor, when she realized others had seen her, had witnessed her in this fragile state, a suffocating shame washed over her. Not because she cried, but because she had let someone else see her cry. She hated that feeling, hated becoming the old woman who fumbled, dropped things, and cried like a child in front of strangers. She hated the pity in someone's eyes, even if those eyes were only full of kindness. Eleanor turned her face away, quickly wiping her tears with her sleeve like a child caught doing something wrong. She wanted to say thank you, but her throat closed tight. No sound came. How did I become this weak? I used to be a solid teacher, a mother, a wife, and now who am I? Just a lonely old woman who dropped my past and shattered it on the floor? The pain didn't lie in the broken photo. It lived in the quiet self-doubt that had grown with every passing year. As her hair turned silver, as everything familiar slowly left her behind. David had left, leaving behind only a gentle glance before stepping out of the cafe, leaving Mrs. Eleanor alone in the corner with the broken pieces of her heart not yet gathered. No one approached, no whispers, no questions. Only the wind kept tapping against the window panes, and a faint jazz melody drifted on as if nothing had happened. Eleanor lowered her head, her hands tightly clutching the photo with its now bent corner. Emptiness surrounded her. But this time, it came with a dull shame, like a shallow but lingering cut. She had exposed the most fragile part of herself, in front of a stranger, and she hated that. A cup of coffee was gently placed on the table. No questions, no invitation, just a pure act of presence. Maria, the Latin woman with deep brown eyes and a calmness that seemed to carry every loss in the world, quietly pulled out a chair and sat beside Eleanor, not across from her, but next to her, shoulder to shoulder. That light touch didn't carry the weight of a body. It carried the weight of understanding. Maria didn't look at Eleanor right away. She just stared quietly into the fire, her eyes far away as if drifting to another place. But her breath was steady, strong, and strangely, that silence didn't make Eleanor uncomfortable. It soothed, like a thin blanket pulled over a freezing night. Eleanor looked up at Maria, her eyes still misty with tears. Maria said nothing. She simply met her gaze, deep, soft, and without judgment. No pity, no curiosity, just presence. That gaze seemed to reach a place Eleanor had buried for 7 years, a place no one had ever stepped into, a place even she was afraid to face. And for reasons unknown, she spoke, very softly, almost just a breath escaping a chest too heavy. I miss him, Robert."
Maria didn't respond, but her eyes softened, gentler, allowing. Eleanor continued, each word released from a frozen pain. "I miss the house, when he was still in it, when everything wasn't so quiet like it is now." Her voice cracked. "I let him go to the store that day, during the pandemic, because I thought I was weaker. But in the end, I'm the one who lived. I'm the one left behind." A breath caught. "I never told anyone. I couldn't, because I was afraid they'd think I was the reason he's gone." Another tear fell, but this time it wasn't cold. It was warm, like a spring thaw after a winter too long. Maria placed her hand on top of Eleanor's. No grip, no pull, just there. And Eleanor broke down. For the first time in 7 years, she didn't feel like she was crying alone. From across the cafe, David stood by the counter, one hand resting on the cup of tea he hadn't finished. His eyes paused on the 2 women, one young, one old, saying nothing but sharing something that words could never carry. He smiled, gently, very gently. A smile that wasn't happy or sad, just understanding. Because sometimes the only thing a person needs at their lowest moment isn't an answer, isn't advice, but someone to sit beside them and not leave.